Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name is Carrie Simpson. I'm the founder of Managed Sales Pros, and today I'm going to be talking about land and expand strategies for MSP sales. I want to make sure that everyone can hear me. So if you can hear me, can you just pop a chat quickly into the right-hand side and let me know that you can hear me before I carry on mute or something? Fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So one of the biggest challenges that we've got right now in managed services sales is there is no remaining land grab for IT support. Everybody that sees value in IT already has that need being met in some way. So whether that means they are working with their buddy next door who fixes their computers for a case of beer, or they're working with your most, revered competitor, they have that need met in some way. And most of the time, reasonable business owners don't break contracts just because they get a good sales call from a MSP. So you're looking to work with people who change providers at times that are minimally invasive to their business. So most of the time, you don't want an aggressively reactive client anyhow. So if you called somebody today and they're like, yeah, we hate our MSP, we got 2 years left on our contract, but I'm ready to break it, I'm going to change providers right now, odds are there's more to that story than you're hearing. So when an MSP, for example, wants to use our services and they've already worked with 3 of my competitors and they hate all of them and everybody that's in our industry is an asshole, odds are I'm going to be the 4th asshole, and I don't necessarily want that business. So that's something to consider when you're pitching into a new prospect. We're looking at technology dependent and technology strategic organizations between 20 and 100 seats. That's our sweet spot here. So that's usually what I talk about. When you're looking at engaging with that market, you're looking for people who aren't going to be hyper reactive in situations. So what we're talking about today is understanding displacement selling. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about when you should pivot your sales ask. So that's when you're asking for something, whether that's the next stage in the sales process or the next deal that you're going to close. You're going to ask someone for something, and you want to pivot from asking for the managed deal to asking for something, less significant, which in this case is our land and expand offering. We're going to talk a little bit about points of entry for land and expand selling. So who are you selling to and why are you choosing those points of entry? Things that are working for our clients right now. We're going to share a little bit of that. And then we're going to talk about how your land and expand strategy changes how and who you hire. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you build land and expand strategy into a pre-existing playbook. So you already have a process that's working for you. You want to add land and expand strategy into that process. You don't want to disrupt your entire sales process. You want to fit it into your process in a place that it's going to make sense without having to rip and replace your entire sales strategy. So displacement selling is essentially knockout selling. That's how we describe it. There's a competitor in place, you want to knock them out and replace them. There's some challenges that come along with that. 3-year contracts, for example. So if you look at the contracts that you're asking your clients to sign, the contracts that they're signing for your competitors are going to be similar. So with 3-year engagements being the norm, how long do you want to wait before you manage to close a new deal? The better your data and the more often you're engaged with the prospect, the more likely it is that you're going to get the tap when it's time to change providers. But again, if that's not going to happen for 2.5 years, how are you going to feed your sales funnel while you're waiting for all those contract renewals to come up? So assume for a minute that one of your competitors did a really aggressive sales push last year. They won a ton of business in your market, and now you're just waiting out their 3-year term before you're going to essentially just change places with them. A displacement sale means the market's saturated. You're viewed as a commodity, and people aren't really looking at you as being any different than the support that they're receiving already. And that's a very difficult conversation to have with a business owner that doesn't see any difference between the guy that fixes his computers for a case of beer and your $170 a seat managed contract, right? If they can't see value in it, you don't want to spend time educating them on it. So there are competitors you want to displace. Your best prospects are already engaged with the competitors that you respect the most in the market. So the ones that are pricing the way you want to, the ones that are offering the services that you're also offering, those are the prospects that you want to win. And the way that you win them is through slow, deliberate, methodical prospecting. You're not going to stumble luckily into an opportunity where they're like, oh yeah, no, our contract's up in like 2 months. Yeah, come on in and talk to us. We're ready, right? That might happen to you a couple times a year and take those gimmies all day long. But odds are you're going to win business by being in the right place at the right time. You'll know when the right time and right place is because you've been prospecting into that account and building that relationship for a significant period of time. Land and expand selling is going to help you do that. But displacement selling has a bunch of interesting challenges focused around it. There's also some added benefits in that when there's no education required. So everybody understands what IT support is, whether you believe you're selling IT support or not, whether you believe that you're selling, business process or whatever, your prospect sees it as IT support. So they don't really want to be educated at the beginning of the sales cycle in the difference between managed services, which is a business model that you've chosen, not something that they understand, and what they're buying right now, which might be a break-fix contract, for example. So if you are doing pure displacement selling, which is identifying opportunities with already engaged organizations and then essentially nurturing them until point of viability, which is about 6 months before contract end date, you can have a much less skilled sales rep do that. You don't have to explain to this prospect why managed services are important. The prospect already sees value in it. They're already buying it. So the education component of the sales process, which is huge in the disruption sales market, isn't here. You can hire somebody that is less skilled, less experienced, and that translates into less expensive to do this prospecting for you. Your best prospects already get it. They're already buying it. You don't have to educate as many people along the sales process journey. The negatives, of course, are those prohibitive contract terms. You want people to sign them. Your competitors want people to sign them. It's a big thing to consider when you're creating your sales playbooks now. A lot of volume is required in displacement selling. So if you're just making 10 calls a day and thinking that that's going to turn into converted business at the end of the quarter, it's not going to happen like that. We're making 120 calls per agent per day here. And if we get 4 to 5 managed services appointments for a client over the course of 1 month with that kind of volume, that's been a great month for us. So another thing to consider is, are you going to have the volume necessary to create displacement sales? And then you need an organized process, because once you start making those 120 dials a day, understanding when they're going to convert is going to be essential to winning them. You don't want to miss the opportunity for that contract end date displacement opportunity because you called them a month later than you had originally planned to do so. And one of your competitors just kind of snuck in there, had the conversation, and won the deal. So process and timing are essential to displacement selling. Here's what a timeline looks like for the typical managed services displacement sell, right? So you start over here, you've got suspects in your pipeline. On average, we take a list of about 2,000 prospects for an MSP, and that will last us a full year. So you've got some time involved in creating the target list that you're going to call into. Then you spend time prospecting into that list. So you take your suspects and you turn them into prospects. Prospects, well, a prospect has budget. The person you're talking to has authority to buy. There's an identified need or pain there, and there's a timeline that's been identified that's acceptable to both parties. So you take your suspects. The lion's share of the work is identifying all that information around turning them into a prospect, but I wouldn't consider a company a prospect until they were actually somewhere on the buying journey. So a suspect, we don't know anything about them. Maybe we bought a list and we bought them segmented by SIC codes, or we bought it segmented by company size, but we don't know if they're a good fit right? You can't take a 20 seat or a 20 employee company and assume that they're going to have the budget necessary to hire a managed service provider. So until you know that piece of information, this isn't really a prospect for you yet. It's just a bunch of data points on a list. The goal is to prospect into that list, turn that into a viable prospect with all of those boxes checked. That takes you to your first sales appointment where you're doing your discovery and probably a needs assessment. And then there's a significant period of time where you're nurturing opportunities. And nothing really happens in that space. So if at the first sales appointment, you identify, and this is where timeline comes in, for example, do you want to meet with a prospect when there are 2 years remaining on their current sales contract, or do you want to meet with them closer to the end, or are you going to meet with them twice? When you're building out your playbook, these are things to consider. Do you want to have meetings with people who really aren't in a position to buy yet? Do you want to solidify that relationship with discovery and needs assessment, or are you going to push that off and continue to nurture it on a fairly regulated schedule until what I call the point of viability? So at some point, like, yes, it's time to consider changing providers, or maybe we're going to stay with our current provider, but we're going to shop around a little bit. We don't know yet. At that moment, that's when the lead becomes viable. That's when you move on to your closing point. So your contract gets signed, the retainer's in, you plan your onboard, right? The deal's closed. That nurture timeline is where most of the wheels come off the bus for MSPs, because they're not necessarily paying attention to that nurture sales cycle timeline because something happens. So if you are the business owner and you're doing your own prospecting, you've got a finite period of time every day that you dedicate to outbound prospecting and follow-ups, and then one of your best clients has some sort of incident and your time is pulled away from prospecting, you ignore the nurture part of the sales process, and that's where the deals get lost. So you know when the contract should turn over, right? You've established that in the prospecting part of the sales cycle. This should be an opportunity in 18 months, right? But if you miss the nurturing opportunities along the way to that deal, you don't win it because somebody just essentially beats you to it. When we're looking at adding land and expand in, what we're trying to do is, one, increase our monthly recurring revenue by adding mailbox money. We want to sell things that are not difficult to support, but that get that client into the habit of writing us that check every month. You want to increase the odds of winning that managed services contract at renewal. So if there is something that you can sell to them that doesn't require displacement in your land and expand journey, now you already have a relationship with them. And not only do you have a relationship with them, but you have a relationship where they're paying you to do something. So if you can create that relationship at the beginning, the odds of them giving you the opportunity to quote on that much larger contract at the end of their current MSP deal increases significantly. And of course, we're going to increase client value over the lifetime of the client. So land and expand is something you consider while prospecting, but you also want to consider it once you've signed the deal and you want to grow your revenue base. When you're adding land and expand and your sales timeline shifts a bit. So if you take a look at, I think we can go back here, hold on. So you look at the difference between this dead zone, this blue dead zone when you're prospecting and nurturing. When you move forward and add in land and expand opportunities, now you've got the same issues at the beginning. You qualify your suspects, qualify your prospects, you get in for that first sales appointment. Your nurture schedule drops to a much smaller bar because you're identifying places where you're able to go in and add something of value to your prospects' tech stack, for example. So you're looking at things that you can sell to them that don't require them to leave the contract with their current provider, probably things that price-wise don't require buy-in from multiple points of entry in the sales process. So you don't want them to have to change providers. You don't want to bump anyone out. You want to sell them something they're not already using, something that's going to add some value to whatever it is that they're trying to improve in their business at that time. And there's going to be a list of things that an IT company could bring to the table that you'll want to consider for marketing, for example, human resources. We're going to go into that a little bit further. But the big thing to think about here is, what can we sell them that doesn't, one, have them running to their current provider and having them ask about it? And two, how are we going to make sure that we manage the relationship in such a way that we don't damage it and that we continue to nurture it and we continue to be the friendly face that's always offering these viable, interesting suggestions on how they can improve their business process? Then, of course, you tee up the managed deal at the end. There's no reason that they shouldn't ask you to quote on that. You've got this established relationship. And ideally, you can win a managed contract one app or one service at a time. Land and expand opportunities are usually a whole lot easier to close than managed opportunities. It's a whole lot easier to sell 8 phones than it is to sell a managed services contract. So if you're working with a sales team already, if you're not doing this yourself, you want to really drive home the idea with your sales team that you always lead with managed services. That's the deal we want. It's easier to get the small deals, but we don't want to box ourselves into a corner as an expert in one particular thing. So if you go into the conversation talking about phones, and they don't want phones, now you're almost going back and saying, but wait, we also do this. And you come off as a company that's pretty much doing anything to make a buck versus, originally you led with this thing thinking that it was going to be a much simpler sell. They don't want that thing. Now you've got to go back and start pulling things out again. And you haven't talked about the thing that you really want, which is the managed services opportunity. If you think about it, managed services solves any of the problems. So you don't have to talk about one thing or the other. You're talking about it holistically at the beginning, and then you're breaking it down into smaller pain points that you can solve, again, without displacing that current provider. So you don't start the sales process with the wedge. The wedge is the thing that you don't walk away empty-handed. Your wedge is your consolation prize. It's not your prize. So a land and expand play is a slow and steady MRR build and a relationship build at the same time. It's going to increase your opportunities for at-bats. It's going to keep your sales reps more engaged. But you don't want to try to bump the incumbent on a land and expand play. And you also kind of want to do it in a way where they're not running to that incumbent and saying, hey, this company talked to me about this. Can you do this for us, right? Then you run the risk of losing both the managed renewal and your land and expand opportunity. So there is a bit of a skill and a science to it. So your points of entry for a managed services opportunity are usually going to be C-suite, financial, operational. So we're looking at the owner of the business between that 20 and 100 seat space, or potentially the controller, the practice manager for health clients, the practice manager for legal clients, the people that are making sure that the bills get paid. So you can start your managed services sale pretty much at the first couple of points of entry here. So you're looking more at that C-suite opportunity. You're going to have a much bigger conversation. If you're going to talk to the controller or you're going to talk to somebody in finance, there's going to be a lot more price-based questions. So I personally would rather have the business conversation and not the pricing conversation. So you want to start in a place where you're talking about big ideas versus smaller, again, land and expand opportunities, which are going to go into places like marketing, HR. I mean, nobody in HR is going to sign off on a managed services contract, right? HR is going to purchase an application or a solution or a service from you, and that will give you access to the rest of the company. Same with marketing, right? There's lots of marketing applications and services that a technology provider could sell that aren't necessarily going to bump up against the managed contract and aren't going to set off alarm bells. But you go into the opportunity looking for your highest value opportunity, the managed contract. If that's not going to be available to you for the next 2.5 years, now you start looking for other problems to solve. And you don't have to limit that problem solving to the C-suite. You can have different conversations that move through the organization. So think about mapping out the organization at the beginning. So if it's a 20-seat company, the odds on them having somebody in every one of these seats is next to impossible. But if it's a 100 or 200-seat opportunity, they're going to have somebody in most of these positions, and that opens up the playing field a little bit. So in the pursuit of co-managed opportunities, this is also going to apply. So consider the business problems that people are looking at in the C-suite. They're going to be a little bit different from the problems that the marketing team is trying to solve. but technology is going to solve most of these problems. And I can't think of anybody's life that doesn't get better when their technology just works properly. So when you're prospecting into a managed services opportunity and you can't get that C-suite person in front of you, there is no reason you can't have that initial qualifying conversation with anybody on this list, or technically anybody that picks up the phone. So when I go in to talk about a managed services opportunity, right at the beginning, I'm going to ask the gatekeeper who I should speak to provide a quote for IT support. And when they give me the answer to that question, I'm going to try and further qualify. I want to find out who that person is. Did they give me the name of their IT person? Because that's not the conversation I want to have first. Did they give me the name of the CEO, or did they give me the name of somebody junior in the organization? Find out who it is, and then from there, you're going to try and qualify the opportunity on size. You're going to try to identify, before you go on and try to spend 17 dials reaching somebody who isn't qualified anyway. Now, the next conversation should be, how many computers are you supporting there? Which isn't really, it's not like asking what the IT budget is, right? You're not asking the receptionist or the office manager, whoever's answered the phone at the time, what their IT budget is for next year. The odds on them knowing that answer off the top of their heads, one, pretty slim. So think about how you can ask questions that aren't going to be intrusive, but that will give you the information you want to know. The next question you're going to ask them is, who are they working with right now? They may or may not know the answer to that. But again, now you can qualify based on, if you know the names of your competitors in the market, right? And they say, oh, we're working with Joe's IT, and you know Joe is a break fix shop. Now you know how they're having that problem solved. So they're not in a managed contract. Now you've got the opportunity for a different type of presentation. Whereas if they give you the name of a company that you know is a well-established managed provider in your market, the conversation is going to shift differently. The more you know about your competitors, the easier your point of entry conversations become. So for land and expand, you're looking at talking to pretty much anybody that has a business or technology problem that you can solve with, ideally something that isn't going to need a lot of support, but that will create the opportunity for that monthly recurring revenue and for that continued movement through the company. So if you're selling something into marketing and sales has a need, now you can solve that problem. If HR has a requirement, you can solve that problem too. Now you've got 3 or 4 different things that you're engaged with in this client's ecosystem. And what you really want is over here, but you've already got X amount of MRR coming in from this business. Now, when you sign the managed contract, you've got that in addition to, as opposed to bundling it all together at the end. So one app at a time or one department at a time, you're winning smaller amounts of business. And that's important for a couple of reasons. Primarily when you're thinking about how you're going to expand your sales team. So as the business owner, you may not be doing a lot of land and expand selling. You might not even have the time for it. But if you're thinking about how you're going to build out your sales process afterwards, whether or not you offer a land and expand opportunity for your sales reps to pursue will influence the type of sales talent that you can attract. So some of the things that are working for us right now for land and expand, voice over IP phone systems are one of the easiest points of entry into a company. And usually your voice over IP provider has a little bit of joint marketing funds available to you. So that's something to consider as well. If you are working with a vendor that offers any of these things and they support their partners with joint marketing funds or marketing materials or sales support of any kind, it may be easier for you to get a little bit of support from the smaller vendors that you're working with than it would be to go to Microsoft, for example. So if you're a Microsoft partner of a certain level, there's a lot of money available for different things right now. But if you haven't reached that kind of celebrity status at Microsoft yet, who can you talk to support you in your sales initiatives, right? If you're about to start selling a whole ton of phone systems because you're going to add voice over IP into your land and expand play, will your vendor support you in that? And how will they support you in that? So those are some conversations to have before you think about what you want to offer for land and expand. Which of your partners is going to be invested in the success of these initiatives? And will they play nice in the sandbox with you? So security assessments are a great way to do land and expand selling. On average, we talk to clients who are perfectly happy with what they have. And the conversation around that is like, when was the last time that you had a second set of eyes take a look at your security requirements? And then people will say, well, what do you mean by that? And that's where the conversation begins. So you really want to just create a bit of a headache for the current provider in this scenario, but you don't have to walk away empty-handed. You can go in and get a good kind of top to bottom overview of what's happening in that organization. You generate some revenue at the same time, and now you know exactly what kinds of problems you've got to go in and solve in a year and a half when you win that managed contract. A compliance audit, again, that's a great way to get a little bit of entry into an organization. Emergency preparedness or backup and business continuity planning. If they're not already buying those things, I would argue that they're not working with an operationally mature managed service provider. So that may be an indication that you're not going up against, the competitor that you thought was fantastic may not be so fantastic, right? If they're not buying those things already, is this a client you want to consider working with later on? Right? If they didn't see value in buying backup, are they going to be a great client for you? So again, they can be trigger moments where you say, hey, this company isn't as technology dependent as we thought, or they're not making an apples comparison of what we're selling and what they're buying, because they think that they're buying managed services, but they're really only buying this. And there's like 6 other things that we do that they're not buying from their current provider. So an overview here becomes important. If you're almost going through and saying, okay, they bought this, they bought this, they bought this, they don't have this, or this. So are these things that we want to try to sell to them? Or is this something that we're going to talk to them about as the relationship evolves and we're trying to get in to win that entire managed services deal? If you have to explain to them that they're not buying managed services, that becomes a little bit sticky, right? Nobody likes to be wrong. Nobody likes to think that they made a poor decision, and people don't like to make buying decisions when they feel like they just made a bad buying decision. So you want to tread lightly over bad mouthing the current provider, for example, or criticizing how they're supporting that client. Because when people feel like they've made terrible choices, the odds of them making another terrible choice in the near future becomes smaller and smaller. So think about how you can start poking holes in the objection, hey, we're good with what we have right now, without making their current provider sound like they don't know what they're doing. And politics is a very important piece of this part of the sales process. If you don't know anything about who they're currently working with, you want to be very careful about how you're presenting the errors that that company is making. For all you know, the business owner is married to the owner of that managed service provider. So if you go in and start talking about how they forgot these huge important things and what a terrible company this is, and we're so much better, but there's a significant relationship at play there, you're not doing yourself any favors. And in fact, you're probably not going to win that deal anyway. So bad mouthing them just gives that particular client a bad taste in their mouth about you. And we're not always going to refer our nearest and dearest if we know that maybe they're not as qualified as they could or should be at that time. But I mean, we're still going to give them our business, right? So consider when you're having conversations about where competitors' shortcomings are, what the personal relationships at play there. Do they go to college together? Do they know somebody? There's all kinds of reasons why somebody may have made a decision that looks bad to you, but felt good to them. Software platforms, I want you to start considering whether or not it makes sense for you to begin supporting things like HubSpot implementations, right? Not everybody wants to sell or support marketing and sales apps, but if that's where the market is leaning, that's something that you're going to want to consider. Microsoft Teams training right now has been exceptionally good for our clients. Everybody pivoting to work remotely. Everyone's trying to build culture. They don't know how to do it. When you think about the new problems that all the remote workplaces have created for technology, they've also created some extraordinary opportunities. So if you can target human resources, for example, talking about how you can use the solutions that they already have to support their remote teams better, that's a great conversation to be having right now. So the biggest value to adding land and expand into your sales strategy is the type of sales talent that you can now hire because you have more opportunities for wins. So there are kind of two types of sales reps. One I would describe as a whale hunter. They're looking for big opportunities and they're not that interested in the frequent closes, right? So you've got your whale hunters who might close four to six deals a year of a significant amount, and that's good for them. They enjoy the nurturing process. They enjoy developing the relationship. They are so used to the feast and famine lifestyle that it doesn't impact their lives in any way. They are professionals. They are normally pretty expensive, right? Somebody who only has to close 6 deals a year to make their numbers isn't going to be the same type of sales asset that has to close something once a week to make their numbers. So if you think about the difference in sales talent between somebody who's closing low value deals regularly and somebody who is patient enough and deliberate enough to close large deals once in a while, there's a significant dip between those two types of sales reps. And yeah, there's lots of people on the spectrum in between the two, but if you're only selling managed, you're leaning far more towards those long sales cycle, large deal whale hunters than you are towards the small, frequent, we like the dopamine hit of selling sales reps. So if you add land and expand into your selling strategy, you can start looking at lower cost talent. You can start looking at talent that is interested in regular and frequent smaller deals, right? So when you're hiring a sales rep, you've got to consider their personality and what they were doing in their previous role. Just because somebody was selling in their previous role doesn't mean they're going to be successful at your MSP. A displacement sales agent needs a much faster sales cycle. So if you think about common displacement products, think about things like photocopiers, office equipment, right? Like that's a, hey, do you need a photocopier? Yes or no? Like, no, when will you need a photocopier? Well, our contract is up X, or, we just bought one yesterday. Those are frequent, high volume, low, I'm not going to say low skill because there's a lot of talent involved in displacement selling as well, but you're not looking at the same kind of skill level that somebody who is used to closing $250,000 deals once a year is going to, sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Or not. So while you're considering who you're going to bring into your organization to support you, one thing I want you to look at is avoiding hiring agents that are making vertical movements. So if you're looking at hiring a sales rep that's working for one of your competitors, for example, if they're looking and they're coming to you and they're not going to be making any more money and they're not going to be doing anything different, and there's no difference really between the job they're doing now and the job they're going to be doing for you, it's something that you should avoid. Normally, if you're going to make a hire from a competitor, you're going to give them an opportunity to do something that they have pretty much topped out at. So this is somebody who wants to move into sales leadership, for example, from a sales role, and they may not be 100% of the way there, but moving them into a sales position as opposed to giving them that, shot at leadership doesn't make a lot of sense for you. If they're looking, there's a reason they're looking. So if they're dissatisfied with the job that they have and you're about to hire them for the exact same job, is there really that much? There could be some big cultural issues, certainly, but consider hiring from outside of the industry and consider hiring people that have a similar sales cycle. So if you don't want to do any land and expand selling at all, you're going to look for somebody that's closing those deals, larger deals, less frequently. If you're going to add land and expand, now you can look at quick dopamine hit sales reps. I want to caution you against placing the burden of creating your sales strategy on your agents, right? So just because somebody's been in sales for 6 years doesn't mean that they can come into your company, sit down at a desk, and build a sales process for you. Sales reps thrive in environments where they have guardrails. So they come into that organization and you give them the tools that they need to be successful. They follow the process that you lay out for them. They don't create the process. They can contribute to your process, but you shouldn't be expecting a sales rep to come in and build one, right? You're not hiring a sales leader, you are hiring a sales rep. So think about the difference between hiring somebody to come in and build a process, right? They're not coming in to consult for you and build a sales strategy. They're coming in to fulfill on the sales strategy that you've already built. So while you're thinking about moving away from sales yourself as the business leader and bringing in someone to do sales, think about documenting aggressively in the year before you hire someone new. What are you doing all day? How do you do it? What's been most successful for you? Think about getting all that documented and then take that, break it down into smaller processes, and then figure out where you can fit in displacement and land and expand, and then potentially those larger disruption sales as well. You don't want to bring someone into your organization who is not already performing elsewhere. So that gets a little sticky when you think about hiring out of competitors. So think outside the industry, think about similar sales cycle more than similar products. We hire people who don't even know what managed services means to do your outbound calling here. So I want to tell you, like a 4-year degree, it doesn't matter, right? We can hire people who are just out of high school. We can hire people who are just out of prison. It doesn't really matter. As long as they can follow a process, they can sell. So don't get caught up in the idea that you have to hire, people right out of college. People that are planning their sales careers 4 steps ahead aren't coming to small managed service providers outside of when they graduate from college. They're going to one of the larger organizations that are going to pay them significantly more. They're going to keep them for 5 years. They're going to burn them out. They're going to train them aggressively. And then the sales rep that spent 4 years at Oracle, hitting President's Club 4 years in a row, is going to go write his own ticket at some software startup, right? They aren't really looking to work for small services businesses. So you're going to work with sales agents most of the time that are already selling services and enjoy selling services. They want a new challenge. They want to do something different. They want to make a little more money. But that vertical movement, MSP to MSP, usually that doesn't work out so well. It's pretty hard to reference somebody who's working at one of your competitors right now, right? You can't really tip off I don't even know if that's legal, so don't take HR advice from me. But you can't really check the references of somebody who's currently engaged with a competitor. So grabbing that agent and bringing them over, by the time you find out that you've made a horrible, horrible mistake, it's going to be too late to save your sales cycle for that year and maybe for several more after that. So somebody just asked me a question about hiring from a vendor or a customer. Well, I would look very, very aggressively at your contract terms before doing so. I know that we have a term in our contract that prohibits any of our agents for working for any of our clients for a 2-year period after we've ended our relationship with that vendor. So, for example, if I'm working with a vendor in the managed services space, they can't hire one of my callers to come work directly for them. So, I don't think you want to hire people from vendors or customers and risk pissing off your vendor or your customer. That it isn't really a good partner move. So I would say that if you're considering making that hire, you want to look at talking to the person that you're going to hire away from before you do that. Like, hey, I really like this person. I think it'd be great in our organization. We've got this new opening that's presenting itself, and I'd really like to consider talking to this person. They might allow you to buy out that asset, for example. When I exited from my last business, I allowed several of my callers, obviously, to go and work for companies that were our clients. So it can happen, but I think that if you start poaching from the people that you're doing business with, you're not going to be doing business with them for much longer. How long do you keep a customer after they find out that you snatched up one of their best sales reps? If you look at your sales funnel by sales task, this helps you figure out who you're going to hire as well. So in the sales development space, you're looking at creating, scrubbing, and building lists. It's a high volume outbound job. You're looking for someone who has high stress tolerance. Sales prospecting, that's your hunter role. That's a high volume role as well. It's a high energy role. Hunters and displacement go together like peas and carrots, right? You want somebody with that high volume, high energy. They're going to grind the phone. They're looking. They love the dopamine hit, right? That's a significantly better fit for a managed service provider than a pure closer would be, for example. So you can bring a closer into your organization. That is a high trust role. Usually if you're going to bring a closer in, they've got a book. So you brought them in from somewhere that sells into the same space as you. So if you've got, for example, maybe you hire someone who works for your local legal association. They know every lawyer in your market. They've got a book already. They've got personal relationships already. They're already networking in that space. In that case, bringing in a closer would be an excellent fit for an MSP. But if you're going to bring in a closer and expect them to be full sales cycle accountable, you're really going to struggle with having them meet the needs that your company is going to have. So sales nurturing, building trust, high volume, a lot of attention to detail. This is where most of the deals get lost. If you remember back on that sales timeline, you're going to lose your deals when you don't follow up as agreed. And then winning deals, well, that's a low volume job because how many deals are going to come across their plate every quarter? But it's a high skill job. You want somebody who is really proven out in that role. So how that applies to land and expand is, again, whale hunters aren't land and expand sellers. Closers aren't land and expand sellers. Hunters are land and expand sellers. So somebody who is has been good in an inside role, even for a software company, for example, where they're dialing out regularly and the volume is high and the deal value is significantly lower. That'll be a much better fit for a land and expand managed services sales strategy than, a enterprise sales rep who's been selling at the 500 seat level and only closes a couple of deals a year. The land and expand impact on your sales strategy is a much bigger talent pool. So you go from having a handful of reps that might work out to having, 100 of them from maybe the 5 that you originally were looking at. So when you're writing out your job description, you're going to be able to match your talent to previous experience significantly better. Again, I want to stress this over and over again. The people that go into sales because they love that up and down kind of the excitement of the hunt, the excitement of the win, the excitement of the deal. If they're not going to get that very often and you can't nurture them appropriately, you're going to have reps that come in and your churn rate is going to be significant. And I know that when an agent leaves us, and this is just an outbound sales appointment setting agent, when one of my agents walks out the door, that cost me $12,000. Right? Every time someone quits, $12,000 to find and hire a new person. So I don't want my agents leaving. I want to make sure that their skill set and their personality traits match up with the kind of sales process that I'm trying to create here. So you also get cost neutral agents significantly faster if you're offering land and expand opportunities. So if you're only selling managed contracts, the odds on your brand new guy sitting down at his desk and landing a managed services contract in the first 30 days, probably not going to happen. First quarter, probably not going to happen. Maybe by 6 months in, they're closing their first managed deal. Whereas if you got land and expand deals that they can focus on, those things are going to close significantly faster. So now you've got an agent that's performing already, that's generating revenue already, and they don't have to wait for that contract end date renewal moment to sell the managed contract. So another question is the idea of land and expand to both increase close rate of prospect nurture as well as reducing the cash burn rate of investing in sales. Yes. So that's what I think about when I think about land and expand. I'm thinking about, okay, I'm about to take on all this overhead. How can I get revenue neutral faster? And how can I keep this agent longer? So I want them to be more engaged with the sales process. I want them to be thinking, I want them thinking critically about this business and how we can help them improve, right? So the more things that I can offer them to succeed, the better that they're going to thrive in that role. So that eye on the prize, like what can I sell next? What can I sell next? What else would be helpful to you? How else can we help your business? That steady engagement. If you think about a client account manager or a farmer role in your business, that farmer role is usually the one that is looking for opportunities once you've closed the deal. So think about how that translates into prospecting. And you're thinking about, okay, how do we balance that personality trait so that steady, check in all the time, nurture, relationship focus, combined with that quick hits, close those deals, get to the point of viability for the managed contract. Once you close that initial first deal as well, you also have the opportunity to take that deal and move it over to your farmers. So if you've got account managers in place, you can look at land and expand selling as a way to get that initial first sale closed and then move that over to people that you know already are good at nurturing, right? They're doing it. They're building your current base. They're landing and expanding. So you land the managed contract and then upsell and cross-sell to increase the value. This is doing it the opposite way. You close something smaller and then hand it off to your farming team to nurture that lead until it's viable. So there's lots of ways to approach it. And which works best for you is really going to depend on where you're starting from. So you've already got a sales playbook, where we're assuming in this case you already have a sales playbook. The big change management points of friction to adding in land and expand. So instead of ripping and replacing your whole sales strategy, the things you'll want to look at first are going to be, how do you change a variable comp plan? So if you've already got a sales rep in place and now you're adding a different burden or a different opportunity, depending on how they're going to look at it, to their role, how are you changing their compensation to account for that? So if currently they're given a base salary plus the first month, for example, of any monthly recurring deal that they sign, is that going to be attractive enough to encourage them to sell these smaller deals, right? Like the first month of an application or a service sale is not going to be as significant as that MRR deal. So if they're used to those larger payouts, do you have to change how you compensate them for those smaller deals? So that'll be your first change management moment, thinking about how you're going to compensate people that are already in your company. You're not bringing in anyone else right now. You're just trying to figure out, how are we going to fix what's not working for us currently? Then you're going to change talk tracks, right? So your initial conversation doesn't change, but what happens after they say no is going to change significantly, because you're going to go looking for other ways that you can support them and help them. Battle card preparation. So if you're talking about competitors in the market and now you're selling smaller opportunities, your competitors change as well. So your competitor for this particular application, for example, changes. Your ultimate competitor, or the managed incumbent in this role, that doesn't change. So you already know how to pitch against that incumbent when you're trying to win the managed deal. Now you've got to go re-educate your sales reps on how they're going to talk to different points of entry, and you're going to talk to them about how they prepare to talk about things that are already being sold in that company. So if you're going to sell HubSpot, for example, you're going to have to prep your reps on how to pitch against what they might be using instead of HubSpot right now. Maybe they're using an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe they're doing, for me, it'd be like, okay, if I want to sell instances of HubSpot to managed service providers, I have to be able to talk to them about why HubSpot is better for outbound prospecting and marketing than ConnectWise, for example. Right? So if they're prospecting ConnectWise, I better be prepared to have a conversation with them about how this compares to what they're doing in ConnectWise. So you'll want to think about it by vertical, right? If you're going to try and talk to them about their practice management software, so medical practice or legal practice, if you're going to start selling practice management software into companies that aren't currently buying managed contracts from you, can you present that opportunity? How are you going to select the one that you're going to represent? And then how are you going to sell against everyone else in the market? That battle card preparation will be important to prepare a rep for success. Otherwise, they're just going to stumble through conversations. Your BANT qualification parameters change as well, because what went from, we only talk to companies that are looking for a pure play managed contract. We're not going to do any co-managed. We're not looking for project work. We don't support anyone that doesn't sign a 3-year deal. If that's your current MSP process, changing it to, now we work with companies that are in managed contracts, but they have to look like this, right? Your BANT qualification parameters are going to change by application or service, but they're not going to change for that ultimate deal that you're looking for. So you're still going to go in looking for the same types of business. This isn't an opportunity to go start selling HubSpot to companies with 5 employees. You're looking at opportunities to get engaged in the prospects that you're already looking to do business with. So you're not changing your targets, but you are changing how you're going to qualify them and at what point. So if ordinarily your sales process is, we don't talk to somebody until they've got like 6 months only remaining on their managed contract, you're going to talk to them significantly sooner now because you want to sell other things to them. And you're going to market differently. So your marketing plan is going to require some adjustments as well. So if you're already what I would describe as a marketing focused MSP, these terms will make more sense to you. But once you begin selling more, you need to change, and you're going to have different opportunities to change your SEO for different offerings. So if you have competitors that are very SEO savvy or potentially working with agencies of the kind that you can't afford, you're going to have some new opportunities once you start doing land and expand selling. So when people are searching for particular things that you're selling now, you can pop up on different long tail, for example, or short tail SEO terms. So you'll maybe want to work with somebody more experienced than me to figure out what terms you want to be ranked for or found for. But if all of the terms for managed services are sewn up by your competitors, now you've got some opportunities to start playing in different spaces and seeing if you can rank significantly higher. Because land and expand kind of works both ways. If somebody calls you to find out whether or not you support HubSpot implementations, you qualify the lead and like, well, we do, but we only work with companies that look like this, X, 2, Y, right? But you can have your phone ringing the other way once you start optimizing the way that you're marketing your new land and expand opportunities. You can also change and optimize your buckets for drip marketing. So once you identify that a company is really like whatever their problems are at the time. So, okay, no, we're good. We like our IT provider. We're not going to change anytime soon. The conversation I want to have with them next is like, great, what would be helpful for your business right now? Like what problem are you trying to solve? So whether I want to start aggressively increasing my opportunities for my referral network by asking them, if their biggest problem right now is they need to hire a whatever, right? Well, I'm not going to become a recruiter tomorrow. So can I introduce them to a recruiter in my network that I exchange referrals with? So there's always an opportunity for referrals at that point. But the buckets that you're making now also are going to include different sales, marketing, HR challenges. So before I would have suggested like find out what's important to this company. Are they security focused? Are we marketing security opportunities to them? Are they looking at, I don't ever want to work with price conscious companies. I'm never looking for someone who's going to look for a less expensive provider, for example, but what are their priorities, right? We're going to market to them based on their priorities. And then once we start identifying what the challenges that they're experiencing in their business are, we get to market to them in different ways. So now we've got new buckets. So we're not just talking about backup, we're talking about business challenges. Now on a higher level. So you want to increase your sales, you want to improve your marketing, you want to hire faster, you want to hire better. Like what are the common problems? What's your business experiencing right now? So if you're a 20 employee managed service provider, what problems are you trying to solve? Because the 20-person companies that you're calling are trying to solve those problems too. It's probably the best place to begin, or talking to your current clients about their challenges right now and the problems that they're trying to solve. So at each spot, right, if I think about my business growth, when I was a $1 million business, I had different problems than I did at 2, for example. And when I had 5 employees, I had different problems than I did when I had 20. So thinking about how you're going to approach them based on the common problems that most companies have at those stages in development. And again, think about your own business. What problems were you having at 1 million that you stopped having at 5, and what new problems presented at 5? That's going to help guide you towards how you're going to talk to the companies that you're pitching about the services that you want to offer to them. And then think about utilizing landing pages for those land and expand offerings. So you don't want to muddy up your managed services brand talking about everything under the sun on your homepage, right? You're a managed services provider. You sell worry-free IT support, right? You sell these other things as well, but you want to be able to push people towards those things independently of your, your primary offering. You don't want to be known as the company that sells HubSpot, right? You sell managed services, and your goal is always winning that managed services deal. So you're not looking for smaller deals, and that's something that I want you to think about over and over again. You're not looking for less profitable deals. You're not looking for smaller deals. You're looking for opportunities to get engaged with the company so that you can win a much bigger deal. So don't start with your wedge. You want to identify pain across the entire organization, because managed services is going to solve all of it. If it can be solved by technology, it's going to be solved by managed services. So think about that as you pursue different departments. Your end goal is always the MSP deal. You just don't want to leave empty-handed. So this is, you can call it land and expand, or you could call it better than nothing, right? Like, if you're going to put all this time, effort, and energy into identifying business problems, start solving those business problems, right? You're unraveling that sweater, and more things are going to become apparent to you as you talk to this company. And if you're solving one problem here and another problem here, you become the natural front runner for the managed services play. If you have a current strategy developed, don't rip and replace it. You don't want to take your sales agent and throw them into chaos so that you can start generating more revenue right away. You want to slowly and methodically change the process and get buy-in from your agent while you're doing it, so that they're not left following a process that they never wanted to do to begin with, right? You hired someone to do this. You've decided that now they're going to do that. Is this going to be the right person for the role? So that's another thing to consider. If you're going to develop two completely different strategies, then land and expand isn't what you would call that. You'll have your, I would call it like small deals and larger deals, right? You've got one rep who's going to go out pursuing the big managed deals, and then you've got a rep who's just looking for those smaller, frequent wins. That's not land and expand. Those are two completely different sales territories. So the path of least resistance is the path most traveled for a reason, right? If there is an uncluttered path to the win, you want to take that path. Most of the time, your competitors are going to be doing the same thing you are. They all want the managed deal. How do you make sure that you are the first company considered when it's time to change providers? Land and expand is a great strategy for that. So, final slide, can managed sales pros help you with that? Yes, we can. We can do it for you, or we can teach you how to do it. We can build your sales playbook. We can build sales training around it. So we're at the top of the hour, and I know that the questions that people were lobbing up there, we've already answered all of them. I've got a couple more minutes if anyone else has another question they'd like to ask now, and I'll let you go at the top of the hour on time. All right, well, if you got no questions, then I must have explained everything really well. Thanks, everyone, for joining me today. This will be available on demand, and the slides are available for download. So thanks for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday.